Hi everybody, welcome to this tutorial on how to draw realistic water droplets. In this tutorial I will show you how to go from basic water droplets like this to a little bit more advanced water droplets like this to being able to use water droplets to really enhance a photorealistic picture that you're drawing like this. After this tutorial, you should have a better understanding of how to draw water droplets and should be able to draw them easier, faster, and a little bit more realistic. But before we start on these more intermediate water droplets, I think it's best that we understand the principles about water droplets and how light affects them. With water droplets, you can have different types of water droplets. You can have very tight balls of water droplets, which are usually on a very hydrophobic water repellent surface, which causes the water droplet to ball up as a tight sphere. When this happens, the light passes through the water droplet and refracts, so it changes directions through the water droplet, and it usually focuses down in behind, or depending on where the light source is, it'll focus down into a smaller point, kind of like a magnifying glass. So it works in the same way. When you have very spherical water droplets, usually the light will pinpoint in a spot either kind of beside, behind, or right underneath the water droplet, depending on where the light source is coming from. The next water droplets are a little bit less spherical, but they're still refracting the light in a certain way that it'll still illuminate more of the opposite direction of where the light source is coming from. So if the light source is coming from the left, it'll refract the light and highlight more underneath the water droplet to the right. Because this water droplet is a little less tall and spherical, it tends not to allow the light to actually exit in behind of the water droplet. It'll stay underneath. So if it's on a leaf, it'll highlight the back part of the water droplet underneath, which is on the leaf. And the next kind of water droplet is a lot more flat. It doesn't hold much height and it doesn't refract much light. Usually, depending on where the light source is coming from, it'll refract the light a little bit and it'll just kind of highlight um, certain parts within the water droplet and then darken certain areas, but it doesn't allow the light to exit, and it has a much milder effect on highlighting the certain parts of the leaf or whatever the water droplet is on. Much of this does depend on where the light source is coming from, whether it's coming from lower in the sky or higher right above. It will impact how the light is refracted to begin with, but that's just a basic rule of thumb that works, 90% of the time. This is just to understand the basics and the basic concepts. So enough of the talking and let's start drawing. So I think it's best to start with water droplets that are a little bit more simple, just so that you can understand the basics. So what materials do you need for this tutorial? You can use just one pencil. I recommend personally to have a variety of a soft, medium, and hard. So for me, I use an H and then a 2B and a 6B, but that's just me. You can use whatever you have. Also, I do like using charcoal as well, so you can use graphite or charcoal. It's up to you. You need a piece of paper, a eraser. It can be a just pencil eraser. It can be a kneaded eraser. It can be whatever eraser you want. And then I like to have something that I can use to blend the graphite. So with that, I usually use a paintbrush or a Kleenex. You can use whatever. You can also just use your finger. It's up to you, honestly. So let's start nice and easy with these basic water droplets. First, you want to put down a foundation of graphite on your paper and just blend it so you have a little bit of a darker area. So when you erase, you'll be able to bring out your water droplet a little bit easier and better. So once you have your graphite down, just give it a nice blend with either a Kleenex, your finger, or like what I'm doing here, I'm using a paintbrush. I'm starting off nice and easy with just a circular water droplet, so just draw a circle. And in this picture, the lighting source is kind of to the top and left of what I'm drawing. So start filling in, putting pencil down towards the top left of your water droplet, and then blending it in. You doing darker to lighter from the top to the bottom. And then blend it with your finger or paintbrush or whatever you have on hand. And you can start pulling out some of the highlights with a kneaded eraser or whatever eraser you have. Pull some of the highlights, and then you also want to add just a little reflection in the top of the water droplet where the light source is coming from. So as you can see, the light is entering from the sort of top left direction. It's going into the water droplet. It's casting a shadow because the light is being refracted, so it's being pulled from one part of the water droplet to the other. So it's going to be darker near the top, and the light is refracted towards the bottom of the water droplet. So here we're going to do a couple more that are different shapes and sizes. So this one is a little bit more oval and it's smaller, and then we're going to do another one that's a little bit of an irregular shape, kind of like a blob shape, and larger. And it's all the same thing, it's all the same concept and principle. You start out making it darker where the source of light is coming from, and then you'll have it a little bit lighter towards the bottom. Even though it's an irregular shape, it's all the same it's all the same principle. So just color it about halfway down and then have it lighter towards the bottom. But I do want to add that this is different than if you're drawing water droplets on a piece of glass, like on a window or car window or anything like that. When you're drawing on a window, it inverts the image. So the ground will be at the top and the sky will be at the bottom. So it's a little bit different it works a little bit differently than if you're drawing water droplets on a solid surface. And all of these examples that I'm doing here are water droplets on solid surfaces. And here you go, that's basically the simple water droplet summed up here. So don't forget to add a little bit of shadow at the bottom, and then you're all done with the simple water droplets. Now, it's all really good to understand the principles, but it doesn't really help too much if you're trying to learn how to do water droplets on an actual subject. So you're trying to do water droplets to enhance a picture or to be the forefront of your picture, the main subject. So with that, I find it's helpful to actually see it on something and not just on a flat surface. So here I've got three different subjects. I've got one is a blueberry, another one is kind of like a piece of grass, and then another one is a leaf, and using different styles of the water droplets on each one so that you can kind of see how to draw each one and how it'll come together on the different surfaces as well. So the first one is a blueberry. So what I like to do is I like to darken the water droplets all around because I know that the blueberry is going to be darker in tone. So I like to darken all of the water droplets that I'm going to do, and then when I fill in the tone for the blueberry, I'll still be able to see the water droplets through that. So you'll want to outline the water droplets again just to enhance the color. Now because the blueberry is darker, it's going to have a lot darker water droplets. There's going to be highlights, but there's going to be more harsh shadow and darker tones to the water droplets than you would if it was a lighter surface. The lighting source is pretty much above, almost straight overhead. So that's where you're going to have the more of the shadow, and then the highlight is going to be a little bit lower. But you'll see as I move along, you'll see how that interacts. But use a Q-tip to start filling in. I put a little bit of charcoal powder and use that just to start filling in some of the water droplets so that you can use your kneaded eraser or your regular eraser to start pulling out some of the highlights. You can use your pencil as well to start filling in some of the darker shadowy areas. And then here you can start using your kneaded eraser or regular eraser to start pulling out some of the highlights. You'll have the reflection towards the top end of the water droplet, pointed directly towards the light source, and then you'll start to pull out some of the highlights lower down at the bottom of the water droplet. Next thing you'll want to do is start adding in some smaller water droplets just to add more character and more um, natural natural look to the blueberry as well. And once you add those, you're pretty much all done. So here you can see it's because it's a round object and the water droplets are spread throughout, you can actually see how the lighting changes within the water droplet depending on where it's located on the blueberry, which I think you really get to see how lighting will change the reflection of the water droplet. So this is going to be the piece of grass. These water droplets are more round, more circular, um, so it's more of a hydrophobic surface. And this one, the lighting is a lot lower. It's kind of actually in the direction of the blueberry, but it's nice and low. So what you'll see is the a completely different look of light passing through these versus with the blueberry. So as mentioned, because this one the light source is a lot lower compared to the blueberry, the shadow is more drawn out. It's a much longer shadow compared to the blueberry, where it's a very short, abrupt shadow. This one is more drawn out, and you can see it's almost it's as long as the water droplets are tall. So you can just use your soft pencil and start filling in the shadow, making it wide at the bottom, same width as water droplet, and then slowly tapering it out. And you want to have all of the water droplets, the shadows are going to be in the same direction because the light source is all the same. And then you can blend it with your paintbrush or a Q-tip or whatever you have on hand. So because the light source is lower and the water droplets are more spherical, the light passes through and it actually leaves a highlight spot within the shadow. So kind of like how a magnifying glass works, it catches the light and then it focuses it down. The same thing happens when a water droplet is nice and round like this. So because it's low in the sky, it'll actually redirect the light and focus it into a small point just behind the water droplet. And if your light source was right above, you would see very little shadow, and the concentrated light source would be right underneath the water droplet. So it's darker on the edges just because that's where the shadow is, where the light is being pulled away, and then it's a little bit lighter in the middle, and then you'll see in a bit I add the specific highlight. So now I'm starting to actually add some reflection into the water droplets. This is a combination of just, I guess, the leaf and some background, although you can't really see any background. Just if it was just white, then it would be a little bit less interesting. So it's a combination of just imaginary background and reflection as well of the leaf. Filling in with the pencil and then also using a Q-tip helps soften it quite a bit. And then using the kneaded eraser to pull out some of the highlights and white spots. And here now I'm starting to bring out some of the light concentration in the shadow, which you can see. And I'll do that for all of the following ones as well. And here at this point you can really see it come together, and you can see the difference in how the water droplets affect lighting compared to the blueberry. It's a completely different lighting effect. And then here I'm going to start working on the ones underneath. Um, these ones are just hanging off of the grass leaf, and these will reflect a little bit of the leaf and then more of background as well, which if you have an interesting background, it would be a little bit more, you would actually be able to see some of the background within the water droplet. And that's the second one done. So different type of water droplet on a different surface and with different lighting. So you can see the difference between the two. So now I'm going to be working on the last one, which is a leaf, and this one is a more low flat water droplets that have more lighting rate overhead. So it's going to be having less light passing through at an angle, distorting less of the light. So now I'm just putting a base layer of color to the leaf using the paintbrush, and then just making sure that I can see enough of the water droplets while I do that. So that's why I outlined them. And then using my soft pencil, I'm just gonna go in and make it a little bit darker, make the leaf a little bit darker, just so that the water droplets stand out a little bit more. And then I'll soften it with the paintbrush again. So now that I have a good base down, I can start pulling out a little bit of the highlights with the water droplets. So I'm just going to use my kneaded eraser. And again, even though the light source is pretty well overhead, it's just slightly angled back. So I'm going to add the highlights just a little bit towards the back of the water droplet. And then have the shadows down below towards the bottom. So now I'm just adding more shadow to the water droplets and refining the edges before I start putting any of the details within the water droplets. The other thing too is that these water droplets, because they're pretty low, they actually magnify what's underneath the water droplets. So if I wanted to do something very, very detailed, if this was going to be more of a realism piece overall, what'll happen is the actual textures of the leaf will be enlarged within the water droplet. So they'll be slightly distorted in terms of shape, but they'll actually be magnified as well. So that's something you can do when you're getting more into realism, is when you have droplets like this, it'll actually enlarge whatever the water droplet is sitting on. Here we go, just going to put the last few finishing touches on this, and you can see, so that's three different pictures, well, four in total: a more basic water droplet, and then to the more advanced water droplets where you can see how lighting will affect each one. So I hope this helped, and I hope this will get you more comfortable with drawing water droplets. And you really don't need a lot, you just need a couple of pencils, or even one pencil will work, and then an eraser and something to smudge the graphite. So overall, pretty easy to do, and I hope that helps, and I hope you guys will start drawing water droplets soon. Thank you.